It is prepping.
Hey, Amir.
Still saying go live. All right, and you guys are officially live. This is our next session, the world of podcasts. I'm going to turn it over to Claudine Moore. You've met her earlier, so off with it, Claudine. See you in an hour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you. And is Tiffany with us?
Yes, I am. Do you see me?
No, we don't see you, Tiffany. You need to bring that leopard. That leopard. You need to bring it.
I see everyone. Is there anything else I need to do?
I'm not sure. I see. I guess. And okay, they can see you. So maybe I just can't see you because I don't see you. But Sam K said that she can see you. And Sam K, I was watching your presentation and it was fantastic. So thank you, Sam K. I saw your presentation.
I got this the plug at the end, Sam K.
Yeah, exactly. There you go, Tiffany. Welcome, Sam K. There you go, Tiffany. Great. Okay, awesome. So welcome to the world of podcasts.
Yes.
I was very excited, Tiffany, when I was working with Annie and we were preparing for this, and I was sort of said I'd love to, moderate and sort of, moderate a panel or interview one of the guests. And I think I told you when I was going through the list, the minute I saw the world of podcasts, I was like, I want to do that one. I'm like, I want to take part in that one. I want to moderate that panel. And I shared that with you, Tiffany, because I'm really fascinated in podcasts and the world of podcasts, as I know a lot of people are. Yeah. And so I know that this is going to be a great panel. I'm going to try and get questions in from the audience afterwards, but forgive me if all the questions are my questions because I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions for you. But
that's okay.
Yeah, Tiffany, would you like to? I'll do another introduction of myself. But as I mentioned before, my name is Claudine Moore. I'm the MD and founder of Seymour Media. We're an international public relations firm specializing on the axis of US, UK, and Pan-Africa, across Africa, mainly West Africa, but across Africa. And we work with everything from Africa startups to big organizations in Africa and multinational organizations. Our big sort of platform that we stand on is leveraging PR and communications, global best practices in PR and communications for African brands and African initiatives. And I'm very passionate about it. I've been doing it for 10 years. And I'd like Tiffany Ashite to introduce herself.
Sure. First of all, Claudine, you do amazing things. So kudos and bravo to you, lady.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Tiffany Ashite. I am currently the executive producer of podcasts at Essence. I have had 12 years in production, all types of production, from digital content to experiential, working with Fortune 500 brands, fashion, food, hospitality, all the things. I even had my own agency for some time, and now I'm producing a roster and a network of podcasts over at Essence. So, yeah.
Yeah, and can you go over some of the podcasts that you, the roster of podcasts that you do for Essence? I think you do 5 of them.
Yes, so we produce 5. The longest standing one, most popular one is Yes Girl podcast, available everywhere. So, shameless plug, please go out, listen, download, leave a review, all the things. So Yes Girl is our pop culture, kind of like, tea for the week, good girlfriend conversation podcast. We have a business podcast called Unbossed. We have a relationships podcast called The Solve. We have a Gen Z podcast called Magic Unfiltered, and we have a beauty podcast called The Color Files. So
I love that.
Everywhere.
Yeah, so you cover pop culture, business, relationships, beauty, and Gen Z. Like, what's left? I think you cover everything with those 5 podcasts.
There's always something. Wellness is definitely a big category that everyone's really getting into. So there's always something.
And in your when I was doing my research on you, you describe yourself as you describe your superpower. And it's funny because I was once asked what my superpower is, and my superpower was I'm a good networker, and I'm a good connector of people. But you put your superpower as organizing chaos. And how has that superpower helped you in the world of podcasts?
Oh, well, just being any type of producer is, it's just literally your superpower is organizing chaos, because you've got to manage everything from budgets to people to personalities to schedules to content to concepts. It's kind of like you're just juggling all these things, and you have to make it make sense. You have to make sure that people understand what you're trying to pitch, what you're trying to convey, what you're trying to sell, what you're trying to get people to listen to. Right. And you sometimes you have to be mediator. If people want one thing and then another side wants another, you got to understand both sides and make it work. And same thing with your guests, your talent, and the audience. So you
got to figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I can see how that all comes into play in sort of producing anything. But as we're talking about podcasts in particular, I think it would be really great if we sort of start from the beginning. And just for the audience members to know that we have 2 parts of this podcast with Tiffany. This is part 1, and part 1 is going to be sort of like how you start, and that's the session we've got today. And then part 2 is tomorrow, and part 2 is going to be sort of like the business of. Is that right, Tiffany? Tomorrow? Yeah. So the business of. So part 1 today is going to be the start of. And as we have a range of people in the audience, some who may already have a podcast of their own, or some who may be interested in it, I thought it would be great just to start with a brief history of podcasts, just for those who are just starting out. When we spoke the other night, I was saying, I think they've been around for 5 years, but you said, no, that they've actually been around for 10 years, 10 plus years. So I think it's great for those of us who want to know, give us a brief, 3-minute spiel on the history of podcasts and where we are, how we landed where we are today in the world of podcasts.
Sure. So I'm starting to see a lot of places say that podcasts are the new blogs, and a lot of people are questioning, is it too much? Is it too much? Is it too much? I mean, it's another medium to be able to get your message out, and it's a highly engaging medium. It started out with people wanting to be able to embed audio into their blogs way back when. And if you think about it, think of some of the early podcasts. When you started to hear about podcasts, it's definitely been at least 10 years since we were talking about Serial and This American Life and, Pod Save America and all these early, people that came into it way before everyone else that were able to build their brand, monetize, and do all the things. But over time, just like blogging, more people get into it. It gets more and more niche. It gets more and more specialized. And us as Black people, people of color, other people get into it, because think about when it first started. And even if you look at the top 200 podcasts on any of the charts, sometimes they can be very homogenous. And so obviously with the opportunity to build your brand, with the opportunity to be able to get your message out and really engage an audience and build a community, a podcast has just literally snowballed in a good way over the past 5 or so years. Mm-hmm. If we think about some of the podcasters that are household names now, like Side Hustle Pro, like Miley Teal, like Amanda Seales. So granted, they have other streams of revenue and other businesses, but the podcast really helped to build and engage the community. And a lot of that is because of the engagement. Think about how many things you're willing to do for 25 to 35 minutes. Podcast is one of those things that really pull you in, that you can multitask, you can commute, you can eat, you can talk to a friend, you can clean your house and still listen to a podcast and still feel connected to the host and the message. And so that's why over the past 5 years, you've seen a lot of people get into it and really be able to morph whatever they want out of it. So for some, it's access, right? Talking to talent and celebrities. For some people, it's content, being able to talk about your specialty to a larger audience. For other people, it's awareness and building their brand. So.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds from that like there's, it sounds like everybody could do the podcast, and that everybody could do it. launching one. But as we were talking about earlier, you know, and we'll get into this later as well in terms of how to start. But I do know that it's always important to be intentional and to be purposeful, not just launch for the sake of launching. And we will get into that. Why do you love podcasts? Why do you, Tiffany, love podcasts?
So honestly, I love podcasts because I love stories. I love to learn, and I love stories. And with some things, I can have a short attention span, and this has been one medium that constantly pulls me in. Like I literally have a routine where I listen to 3 podcasts in the morning just to find out what's happening in the news, what's happening in the world, and then like what's happening in culture. And it's literally part of my morning routine. Like get dressed, move from my bed to my desk. Exactly, quarantine living. And literally I have it on a playlist and I just go in, and I love being able to learn and digest super quick, super fast, but like super deep.
So, okay, I'm somebody listening in, attending this session, and I've been thinking about, you know, launching a podcast for a while, and we'll get into those who already have started, but I'm thinking of launching a podcast. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I begin?
So a lot of people, where they start is they Google how to podcast. They come across a bunch of articles on what equipment to buy, and then they go to Amazon and they just end up spending $200 to $500 or more on equipment. That's the wrong place to start.
Right. Okay.
Well, first of all, you're now like spending money and haven't figured out what you're doing with this. It's like deciding you want to renovate your house and then going to Home Depot and buying all the tools without having the blueprint of what you're trying to do.
Right.
You don't know if you want to renovate the kitchen or the bathroom, but you just went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of tools and they're sitting in your living room like, where do I go from here? So right, exactly. So what I tell people is there are a handful of things that you need. First is what is your idea? And a lot of times people have an idea up here, but they never write it down. Think about all the ideas that have popped in your head, either when you're by yourself or talking to a friend, and you're like, that's a really good idea. And then you never write it down. So we keep so much in our head. The first thing I always tell people is, what is your podcast idea? Write it down and formulate it as if you were pitching it to somebody. Because you need to be able to communicate your concept and your story in order for people to buy into it. So that would be the first thing. The other things would be, you know, do you have a title for it? You know, there are over 700,000 podcasts in the iTunes, Apple Podcast Store. Like, what title do you have for this, and what's going to make it stand out?
How do you go about selecting a title? Like, where do you begin? Because you know, the notion is everybody wants to select a title that is cute and catchy, and you know, something that's just eye-grabbing. But how do you even go about that? And does the title have to immediately describe the content or the theme or the tone of your podcast?
So it should. Short answer is yes, but. So.
Okay. I want to hear the but part. Yeah. Oh, what comes after the but?
Right. So the but is, does your audience get it? Right. So, you know, you can have a really clever title, but if it's an inside joke that like you get, but other people, especially your audience, won't get, then it's not worth it. Leave it on the table. So, you know, is it a business podcast? Is it a news podcast? Like, if you don't have to be so literal and call it like, you know, Business News Daily. If you want to make it fun and quirky, you can, but you have to think about your audience and think about, okay, well, what phrase or word correlates to the topic of this podcast, but also relates to my audience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You see, I'm taking notes because this is, like I said, this is as much as a session for everybody else as it is about like me being your student. I'm your student right now, Tiffany. So that's why I'm your enthusiastic student. So, okay. So you're thinking about a podcast. You said, think about what your idea is. Formulate it as if you're pitching somebody, which is brilliant because, again, I think, and I was saying this earlier in my session, it's so important not to really think about who is receiving, who's on the receiving end of your message, not you. Like, oh, I think that sounds great. Okay, what do your audience think?
Right.
And thinking about who your audience are, because we have different, we'll have different segments to our audience, and thinking what is going to, what sort of messaging, and in this case, title, will sort of cut across all your audiences in terms of their understanding. And then the second thing you said was formulating an idea, thinking of a title. What about equipment? So equipment at what point do you've got the idea, you've got the title, what then?
So the equipment is coming. I would say with the title, also look to see if someone else has it.
Oh, because of course.
I can't tell you how many times I'll search a podcast and someone may have like a variation off by a word. So that's just something to consider. Like do the due diligence and see how many people already have it, because standing out and being able to be distinguishable is another thing. So once you've done that and you're working on your format and, like you said, your audience, because audience matters, you want to get the essentials, right? So knowing what the format of your podcast is actually key to knowing what kind of equipment you're going to get. So the reason why is because at the end of the day, is it going to be just you in the podcast? Is it going to be co-hosted? Are you trying to create like a narrative story that's going to require sound and layers and sound design? Those are things you have to ask yourself, and you should ask yourself before you go buy the equipment. If it's just you and the mic, you can literally start off with your laptop, a good mic. There are a bunch of places that literally have ranks of different mics all the way from $49 to $200. I love a good like Sennheiser or Shure mic. That's just me. And then I prefer headphones. Some people will do their podcast just recording into their laptop, but headphones help you for playback, so you can really hear the nuances, background noise, ums and ahs, birds chirping in the background. So if it's just you and the mic, get your laptop, get your, inexpensive mic, get some headphones, and just start. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Just start testing and recording.
What if it's, a lot of people are taking, and rightly so, but taking advantage of the fact that, the world is like sheltering in place. So everybody's at home, which is, every time I think about that, Tiffany, I'm just like, wow, like I can't even believe that we're here. But anyway, we are.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But we're at home. So everyone's at home. So I think a lot of people are taking advantage of the fact that they can now, everybody's at home, and they can now do like what Annie's doing with, with having this virtual conference. So a lot of people are going to want to take advantage of the fact that I have an opportunity, because everyone's at home anyway, of having guests.
Yeah.
I'm having guests. Yeah. What if they want a co-host or a guest that isn't in their home, that is in another part of the world, or they want to interview somebody in another part of the world as part of their podcast? What do they have to do?
So honestly, take advantage of this quarantine time while you can, because, people are available. And so people want to talk to other people, and they want to get their message or their product that it ran out. So for 2021, and we're all back in the streets. There are a couple of tools. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So a lot of people are using Zoom. I know that it's a back and forth because there have been some, questionable privacy issues with Zoom. I would say if you are going to use Zoom, just spring for, a paid package, because it does allow you to be able to like create and set your own security and passcodes and all those things. Another tool is StreamYard. So StreamYard is a tool that allows just very similar to Zoom, but allows you to be able to do like motion graphics and some other, amenities on top of your video. And the good thing about that tool is it allows you to be able to either rip the video or rip the audio. So if you wanted to say, cut a clip as part of a video teaser but run the whole conversation as a podcast. You can do that. So, and it's very like turnkey. So, and even like tools like this that we're using for this conference. I mean, if Ani chooses to, and forgive me if I'm giving away the secret sauce, like she may choose to literally pull all of these sessions and roll them out in pieces as podcasts, as like mini episodes based on the topics if she wanted to.
So that's interesting. So I mean, I guess the way that I've always thought of podcasts is that it's always just audio, but you're speaking about visuals as well.
Yeah. So the thing is, podcast is audio. Like true to its form, it is all about audio. Mm-hmm. However, we live in such a just integrated society that you have to use multiple mediums to get the word out. You can't just rely on getting your ratings from Apple or, you know, just putting up a graphic on social. You have to do more because there's over 700,000 podcasts out there. You have to do other things. So video is definitely a way to amplify it. So if you can capture video, especially.
Sorry, continue. No, please continue. Yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, if you can capture video, especially now while everyone is home, do that. So do it and then cut a few clips from it. You don't have to release the whole conversation as a video. You can release pieces of it. So it's to entice people.
Yeah, no, it's so funny you say that, because an example of that is we are doing this conference now. I've made this, so we're doing a hopping conference now. I'm interviewing you on behalf of the African women in tech. But I'm also doing an Instagram live. So I think this is an example of what you're saying. I'm doing an Instagram live. They can only see me. They can't see you, but they can see what I'm doing. So I'm doing Instagram live with Tiffany Ashite from Essence Magazine, for those who have just joined from Instagram. But I love what you're saying, because I think this is why it's so important to have this conversation with somebody like yourself, because you're thinking of podcasts, you're thinking of audio, but you're absolutely right. I guess what you're saying, for example, is that you can video while you're doing the podcast, snippets of that video, and I guess make it into a clip and put it on, Instagram TV, or put it on your YouTube channel, or send it out. And it's something. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think certainly I've always thought of podcasts as just in that pure form of being a podcast. But you're right. Depending on how you do it, you're able to, especially if you film it, you're able to use that information and even take snippets of it and put it on your LinkedIn, for example. No, you don't. Yeah. Right. And it's funny because I recently did that. I've never put video on LinkedIn ever. I've always, I don't know why, but I've just never done that. And then just the other day, the program that we're working on, I recorded like a 1.5 minute video. And I was like, you know what, this is actually quite a good video and quite informative. I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. Like, why not? And the response I got from LinkedIn versus the response from Instagram versus the response from Facebook, different audiences. Different types of audiences was very different, but it got the word out. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think people tend to think of, podcasts and just using that platform in a very purist way, but you can use the content in multiple ways.
You absolutely should. I mean, absolutely, hands down should.
So any other steps? We've gone over the equipment, the title, thinking of your audience, your ideas. So what then?
So the one other thing I like to ask people is, what is your goal? Like, you're starting this podcast and why? So after this, I have a couple of like slides that I can either screen share
let's
or I can.
Some slides.
Okay, let's see. Let me know if I'm doing this right when you can see.
Yeah. I think to share the slides, at the bottom of the screen, there's a little box with a line through it.
Like there? Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it. And I'm acting like I'm the expert. Okay. I learned that. Literally, Annie showed me that like an hour ago. So I'm acting like I'm the expert. It's because Annie just showed me. So great. Podcast formats. Brilliant.
Yeah. So just simply going back to like what some of the formats are and why that's so important in like the equipment you buy. These are, some of the most popular formats that exist. Like we said before, is it solo? Is it one-on-one interview? So solo commentary could just be like, if you wanted to create a comms marketing PR podcast, and every week or whatever, you're giving tips and you don't talk to anybody, but you're just kind of giving out the content. That's just you, no one else. That's a solo commentary or a solo cast.
Yeah.
And so these are all examples. I won't go through them for the sake of time, but these are all the examples of formats and examples of shows that fit within those formats. The last two, hybrid and repurpose, go back to what we were talking about. So repurpose is when someone will take an event, kind of like this conference, or something else, and then repurpose it by putting it on a podcast, the podcast as medium.
So we have. So can you just read the bullet points of what you have there? So you have solo commentary.
Solo commentary. So an example is the Bloom. So the Bloom is like it's a wellness meditation podcast from the founder of Travel Noir.
Oh, yeah.
And she's not really, so she's not really talking to anyone. It's just her for 15, 20 minutes, just mindful meditation, just kind of talking again to the listener, creating a one-on-one relationship with the audience, no one else. One-on-one interviews, we see those all the time. Going back to what you said, people are available. People want to talk and promote, right? So there's a bunch of podcasts that do that. Just two examples, Small Doses, Miley Teals. They constantly have influencers and thought leaders and celebrities on the show to just talk about everything from life to whatever project they're working on. Panel co-hosted. So the Read, the Friend Zone, it's two or more. And sometimes it's just them kikiing and talking about whatever is happening in the world. And sometimes they're interviewing someone else. But it's now no longer one-on-one. There's multiple voices in there. That format kind of evolves. Narrative nonfiction, it's all about telling the story, but based on a true story. So we talked about Serial earlier. One really good one from a friend of mine, Anthony Frazier, is Through Her Eyes, where it was a short podcast that examined the lives of mothers after they've lost their children to gun violence, which is heavy. But when you hear the mothers, when you hear them telling their stories, it engages you. I mean, it's literally creating a story based on real events. That's when you interview people and you get sound clips and it gets very layered, but at the end you feel like you understand a story. You didn't read the book, you listened to the podcast, but you got engaged into a story. And then fiction is very similar, except it's based on non-real events. So a lot of those are starting to become adapted into shows and television. So Homecoming was initially a podcast, and now it's a series on Amazon Prime. And so that's an example of how, for the writers out there, if you have a script, maybe think about starting it off as a podcast.
Oh, that's really interesting. So if you're a writer, if you're a writer starting off as this is just an example of what you're saying, starting it off as a podcast, then morphing it into something else.
Correct. Yeah. Because sometimes people need a proof of concept.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So at what point, what are some sort of classic mistakes that, you have more to go through? So, okay, maybe this is actually coming to what I was going to say. I'll let you continue with your slides. I didn't know you had more slides. Sorry. I know questions for you.
It's all good. This was just to answer your other question. Like, what was the other thing? Just your goal. Like, is it to build a brand? Is it to build your personal brand, to build a community, to make money, or to leverage the podcast into other mediums? Just like we talked about, like, could you build this as a scripted podcast and then pitch it for hopes of it getting picked up on television or film? So just asking yourself what your goal is when you're going into it really helps you stay on course.
That's what if your goal is, what if you do want to scale them? Sorry, can we just put that slide again? Sorry, I want to that.
Yeah. Sure.
What if your goal is that you do want to monetize it, you do want to build a community, you do want it to be your personal brand? What if these are all your goals? What if, because it is quite feasible that these could be all your goals. If I'm just thinking about why I would start one, it would be for all of these reasons. It would be to build a community. It would be to build not necessarily a personal brand, but to help personal brand in your business. I have a business, so it's on my personal brand. To leverage the podcast to other mediums, sure. and to monetize it. We're all nothing wrong with making money. So what?
No.
So what if your goals are all of these, and can your goals be all of these?
Your goal prioritization and strategy at that point be crucial. So of all of these, you always want to grow your audience. So really figuring out like, how do you grow your audience, and then what does a community look like to you, right? So a lot of times you can't wait till you have 10,000 downloads. I mean, many podcasts having 900 or 1,000 per episode is very successful. If those were Instagram followers, I know that would feel paltry, but in the podcast world, because the engagement is deeper, numbers like that aren't bad. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, I have, 800 to 1,000 people that listen to my podcast every episode. How can I build a community from them, right? Are you doing a Patreon? Do you have a newsletter? Are you doing some type of, now virtual meetup? Like, what are you doing after the show to keep them engaged? Are you talking to them on social media, like giving them like, here's a weekly question. Here's what the topic's going to be. Let me know your thoughts. Pitch me ideas. How are you engaging them after the show is over? Because that's how you get to the other goals, right? It's not just overnight. Oh, I scaled it, and now come all the blessings of all the things.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I love that. So what you're saying, Tiffany, is that of all these goals, really prioritize. And it sounds like what you're saying is, don't think about the money straight away. That will come if you do everything else. Is that right? Or am I wrong in thinking that?
No, you're right. I would say, like, don't just say it's going to come tomorrow, but explore options on how you can monetize, but be strategic about how you get to those options. Because a lot of people make money off of their Patreon, and just by creating exclusivity and community and offering access to that intimate group, and they monetize like that. Some people, the larger podcasts, they monetize off of sponsors. There other pre-quarantine would monetize by doing events. So there's different ways to make the money, but growing the community is first, and exploring the options on how to make the money.
Okay, that's brilliant advice. And I think tomorrow we'll be going on to the business of podcast. So we'll speak about the money. We'll speak about the money tomorrow. Okay, great. Did you have another slide, or was this your?
I have one at the end, just full of research.
Okay, great. So you've got your idea. Just to recap what Tiffany said, you've got your idea, you've got your title, you've got your equipment, you know the format, you're ready to start. What are some classic things that people do to start that they shouldn't do, but they think they should do? I'm sure that, it's like in every business, everyone has, there's the perception of what you should do, and the reality of what you should do. So, as for the expert, we have you all to ourselves. What are some of the perceived things to do, and what are the, perceived things to do versus the real things to do?
So I would always say 3 things that people get wrong is, one is that they record and they don't let anyone listen to it. They just put it out there. And so before we, like in my entire career of podcasts, you always want to create test episodes that you just record so that you, your co-host, whomever, get comfortable talking on the mic, get comfortable talking to each other, learn a flow, and then you record it. You do not upload it for the masses, but you send it to like a brain trust of people. Tell me what you think. You listen to it. Is it too long? Is it too short? What was your feeling afterwards? Like, create a test group. Do that more than once.
Okay.
I would suggest doing it at least 2, if not 3 times.
So when you say 2 or 3 times, so you're saying record 2 or 3 episodes and have 2 or 3 sets of like a feedback loop on 2 or 3 episodes?
Yes, I would say record the one, send it out to your test group, get that feedback, go at it again. And do that. Yeah. So
really, before you even have launch your first one, just Don't just record it and send it out. Record it. Listen to it on your headphones, like you said, to hear any background noise, because I'm sure and the thing is that's a big hurdle to get through too, Tiffany, is like learning to be comfortable with hearing your own voice. I did a webinar in April. My agency did a big webinar, and it took me a good couple of days to be able to sit and watch it, because just to sit and watch you back in video, and we're so critical of ourselves, and to listen to ourselves, it has to be like in the top 5 most uncomfortable things to do. So I think people should acknowledge that and understand that it is going to be very uncomfortable listening to your voice.
Oh, absolutely. Hands down. I don't know too many people that off a first rip enjoy listening to the sound of their voice. And it's easier when there's someone else. Like us hearing our conversation is different than it just being you for 20 minutes talking.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's very different. Yeah, absolutely. Very different. So you record your episode, you listen to it yourself, you get your little brain trust, you get your feedback. You can put a group, a sort of brain trust to sort of give you feedback on it. You then go and you don't record it again. You go record that same group again, you record it again. So you've done it about 2 or 3 times. You've done it, you're happy with it, you're ready.
Yeah. At that point, put it out there, because the other mistake that people make is that they overthink.
Yes.
And they wait for perfection, and then 6 months pass and a year passed, and you were promoting something that should have been out a long time ago. So just put it out there. And
when you say put it out there, what does that look like? So what are the steps in putting it out there?
So the good thing is now there are so many tools to help you put it out there. I mean, Anchor is the biggest self-serve resource that people use. So Anchor is kind of a one-stop shop. It's been acquired by Spotify, and it's a one-stop shop that allows you to submit your podcast to all of the majors, right? Spotify, obviously, Apple, and others like Stitcher and iHeart, etc. And so the good thing is it's a one-stop shop for being able to submit. So at that point, you will have your cover art. So whatever artwork that's going to be your icon when people go to see your podcast, you want to get that together. You want to get a description, submit that. A lot of times the services will ask for a snippet. So have a trailer, work on a trailer.
How long is that trailer being?
No more than, honestly, the longest I've seen are 2 minutes. For me, that's personally a little too long.
A long time.
Yeah, but I would say no more than like a minute 15. Because sometimes it's hard to get it into a minute. So you creep over a little bit. Yeah. A minute 15 is nice and succinct. Yeah. If you can do 45 seconds and you feel like it's to the point and engaging, go at it. But I would say not over a minute 15.
Okay, a minute 15. So any tips for people on the cover art that they should use for a podcast?
Well, I would say, as far as resources, there's a million design resources out there. You just got to ask yourself, when people search your podcast, how will you stand out, right? So if you were to go into the Apple Podcast player and you look at the homepage and you see all of the different cover arts, which ones stand out the most to you, right? You want yours to stand out, right? If I go say, oh, you need to check out Claudine's podcast, and then I tell them the name of it and they're searching it, you want it to jump out at you. Is it this one? Yeah, the one with the pink background, or the one with her laughing in a garden or something like that.
But how did you know that I like pink, and pink is like my logo for everything? Like I live in a pink world. So
that was a wild guess. I did not know. I need to go to play the lottery today.
Yeah, exactly. You should. Yeah, and my logo is pink too. So it's funny you said pink. Yeah, I live in a pink world.
Oh my gosh. I would say go with something bold, but don't make it too busy. That's the one mistake that people make. They make it too busy. Keep it lean.
Yeah. Okay. Lean and not too busy. Yeah, because we live in a very visual world, and we live in a visual world, and we live in a world where people have very short attention spans. So you literally have seconds to engage somebody. or to engage an audience. I don't have any statistics on how many seconds that is, but it literally is, it's seconds to engage somebody. So yeah. Now, what if you start off with some cover art? But, you know, I think the reason people overthink it is because things seem so permanent. So it seems so permanent that, okay, this is my cover art and I've got to stick with it. How long do you know, at what point can you maybe change the cover art or maybe change the description? Like how permanent?
Well, as far as the cover art goes, you want to keep it for as long as you can.
Right, for brand identity purposes.
Exactly, for brand identity. So like as you're growing your audience, you want to be able to keep it. Overthinking perfection is just, it's
the enemy of progress.
It is the enemy of progress. Absolutely. So get it out there. There are people that I've heard them say, oh, you know, I don't like the cover art, but it's so recognizable. I'm just going to keep it. So if it's recognizable and it's getting you again to the goal, which is awareness,
yeah,
then be at peace with the cover art.
Everybody should look at the cover art as really being their logo for their podcast. That's essentially what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you think about it, looking at it from that position, logo of your podcast, you don't play with logos. Like people have the same logo for years. You know, they have them for a long time. You know, because it's like, you know, it's your brand identity. So so it's worthwhile given, you know, I think based on what you're saying and the stages that you've taken us through in terms of your idea, the title and so on, be thinking about, you know, as you're thinking about your, you know, that sort of those sorts of things, also thinking about the visuals. You're going through all of that because some of your idea, your title and everything will inform your logo and your visuals. It will inform at least sort of the energy behind it and the feeling behind it.
Exactly. See, you come through with that communication. It all
wraps together, which is, it all comes together. And, you know, even in the session that I was speaking to earlier, it's all about being purposeful and intentional. So at every step of the way with your podcasts, which is what I hear you saying, is being intentional with the format, intentional with the goal, intentional with your idea, intentional in terms of, are you doing, you know, why are you doing this? You know, always start with why, intentional as to the why. So this is all great. Any big no-nos before you start? Like, do not do this.
I would say you want to edit the episode. Like a lot of times, even when you finally do upload it, edit. You'd be surprised how many times people say and take long pauses in a conversation.
Yeah.
And no one wants to be on the sideline
of that. I'm horrible.
Same here.
I'm horrible at that. Yeah, exactly.
And like when you play it back, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's like, how many times am I going to say in one sentence? It's like I'm annoying myself.
And it's different when you're talking live and you're having a conversation and going back and forth. But for your audience, they're spectators, right? So nobody wants to see the star of the basketball team dribbling the ball for 5 minutes before they shoot. Like, bruh, just get to it.
Shoot. Yeah. If we miss or not, it's fine, but just shoot.
Exactly. So you want to edit. And so there's different types of software out there. So again, if you are keeping it super, super, super lean, you know, some people literally just do solo podcasts. When they first got started, they just had a mic and used GarageBand. That's not the route that I would go to, but I'm not.
What was the route that you would go in terms of
tools? In terms of editing, three that range in budget. So there's Audacity. Audacity is free, but the plugins or the add-ons sometimes can cost, but they really help when it comes to things like cleaning up your audio. And sometimes if there's crosstalk or if there's background noise or echoing, there are plugins that can help to minimize that. So that's on the cheaper end, as in free. And the middle end would be Hindenburg. So Hindenburg is one step below Pro Tools. Pro Tools is the most expensive. So I understand if people don't want to spring several hundreds of dollars on Pro Tools software. Hindenburg is in the middle. They do a 30-day free trial. So if you just want to test drive and see, but there are so many bells and whistles that will help to make your audio strong and sharp and clean and crisp. And the audio quality matters.
Yes.
Whether it's a one-on-one conversation, you by yourself, or if you have sound design in the back, the quality matters. So those three I would recommend.
Okay, so I've had a quick look at we have 15 minutes left, and I'm having a quick look at the some of the questions. So Louise Mitchell, hi Louise. She asked I didn't see Louise's question, but her question was about editing, about software to edit. So we've already answered that question. You said Audacity. Okay. You said Pro Tools if you want to really spend a lot of money. And what was the second one you mentioned?
Hindenburg. So yeah, okay. Yeah.
And Louise, after this session, Tiffany will be sharing some resources, and I'm sure that will include a list of some of these editing tools. You're welcome, Louise. Then another question that we have, Sheba's agreeing with us that attention spans are sorely lacking. So
yeah, Sheba.
And Sheba is also saying she's thanking you for all the great information, Tiffany. So she's thanking you for that. We have a question from Misha. Hi, Misha. Misha's question is it important to keep a consistent structure? Yeah. Yes. I mean, so yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Misha.
Yeah. Hey, Misha. Absolutely. So for two reasons, right? So it's okay to experiment, but you want to create structure so that your listener can start to understand the flow.
Yes.
Because some people prefer, they can only engage for a certain amount of time. So even though they love your podcast, they may only stick around for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, right? And it could be because there's something that you do, there's a segment that you have that people really enjoy. If we were to translate this to like television, it's why talk shows have certain segments, right? Yeah. If you look at a talk show, right, they have the band play, the host does a monologue or their questions, then they bring out the guests, then maybe there's food or a comedian or something. Things are broken up into segments so that the listener doesn't feel like they're just being pulled into a black hole of conversation, and so that they don't lose interest. So you want to break it up into segments. You want to experiment with what those segments could be, and you want to create a structure based on that. The benefit is as you scale, you may be able to monetize off of one of those segments later on.
Yeah. So can you give us an example of like segmentation of like just in any sector, or just maybe a podcast that you know that has good segments? That would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So one is NPR, It's Been a Minute with Sam Sanders. So he uses his segments to be able to create more audience engagement. So what he'll do is every Friday he plays voicemails from the listeners. And on those voicemails, they've said like what good thing has happened to them this week. And so what that does is it creates like a line of communication. Yeah. I know listen to me every week or, multiple times a week. Call this line, leave your voicemail, and you may end up on air, right? That's how you build it.
He basically has a voicemail box that every people just,
and they literally,
in his segment, he talks about that message. Perfect. So you literally call up, leave him a message, and he plays some of those back.
Yeah, so you can email him the voice notes. People email him videos, and he plays only the audio. Literally, it's just a segment, and it airs every Friday like clockwork.
Oh, I love that. And that's great because that's what you're describing as a segment, and that kind of segment also is a great way of creating community.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a great way of creating community, and it also it also lets the audience know that it's not just straight away when I hear that, I know that he's interested in a two-way communication. Him communicating with his audience, and then he wants his audience to communicate to him and other people. So it's not just about a platform for him and his ideas, but it's a platform of hearing from other people, and then he'll respond to the people, which is great. Yeah. And then on other days does he do something else? What are his other segments like that he does that are interesting, or anybody else that he does?
So every once in a while, not every once in a while, maybe like once a week, depending on the guest, he'll do this segment called Who Said That?
Yeah.
And so it's a game that he plays with the guests where he'll run down 3 or 4 quotes from the week from, celebrities or thought leaders. And then he'll play that game with the guests like, well, who said this? and then it's a back and forth, but it's something that you as the listener can count on.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, that you look forward to, which is also another reason to always tune in.
Yeah. And to answer what Misha was saying about being consistent, it's another reason to be consistent. You know, yeah, it's another reason to be consistent. What are some of your favorite podcasts? If you were to name 3 that you love and 3 that you don't like, if you don't want to say the names of them, just maybe podcasts, the reasons you don't like certain podcasts, if you don't want to mention their names, but you know.
So I will start with, it's not shows that I don't like. It's more so, for me, it's a preference of format. Again, my attention span is short. Yeah. And so I cannot hold on for a 90-minute podcast. I can't hold on for more than like an hour. After an hour, it's hard. And so there are some podcasts that are big and they have a huge following, and they do, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I listen to those. I just taper off at the like 1 hour mark.
Yeah, so that's a lot. Even 1 hour is a lot. I mean, I guess if you're driving, or if you, like I said earlier, you're cleaning, or if you're doing something, you know, where you just want some background noise. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. With some of my favorites, like I love podcasts where I can learn. So, you know, I start my day with Start Here, which is a news podcast. It's like literally it's 22 minutes. Every day it's like 22 minutes, and they tell you what's happening in the world in 22 minutes. And then as the day goes by, like I said, I listen to It's Been a Minute by NPR. I listen to our podcast, which Yes Girl and Unboss and The Solve. I am a fan, and I'm a fan of our podcast simply because it's great conversation. And when we're sitting at home by ourselves, and I live in a studio, so it's nice to hear other voices and not feel
and not feel like it's just me in these 4 walls. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I get it. Exactly. And for those of those sort of audience members who have just tuned in or tuned in late, Tiffany Asherton, she is the executive producer of Podcasts for Essence, and she produces Yes Girl Podcast, Unbossed, The Solved, The Color Files, and Magic Unfiltered for Essence Magazine. So those of you who joined in late, that's what Tiffany does. So yeah, that's great. So we have 8 more minutes. Thank you, Janet. We have 8 more minutes, and Louise has asked a question. So I'm going to read Louise's question. Thank you, Louise Mitchell. Why do podcasters seem to spend so much time on their intro, music, etc., when we know that we want to listen to their content and want them to simply get on with it? Louise, I feel your frustration, because I'm like that too. I'm like, okay, enough already. Like, get on with it. Yeah, why? Yeah, good question. Why?
It's a warm up, right? So I get it. People are like, just get to the meat. Just if you don't start talking to Oprah already, come on. Right. But it's a warm up for multiple reasons. So you may not be new to the podcast, but for people that are new to the podcast, you got to set it up, right? And you never know when people are coming in. We've literally seen reviews where people say, oh, I just discovered this podcast and I'm going back to listen to the entire roster. So you have to create a foundation, because everyone is new at some point. You just don't know when they're new. So the intros and the intro music creates familiarity, right? Mm-hmm. So I know when I press play, this is the show that I expected to listen to, period.
How long should that be, that intro music? Because if Louise is saying the intro music seems long, which is true, sometimes it does, you know, and I know with podcasts, and especially as you're a producer of them, the length of time of the music is something you think about. Is it going to be 20 seconds, 30 seconds? How long should it be, the intro music?
It depends on how you're setting it up, right? Is it just music? Is it music and like a setup? Today is Thursday or Friday.
It's just music. It's music, just music, and then you start speaking over it.
So I would say you want to keep the music 6 to 7 seconds, like just setting it up. Just like the music goes into the talking and the conversation. What I've seen some shows do, because to Louise's point, people just want to get on with it. So what some shows will do now is cut a super short clip, like 10 to 15 seconds of the conversation, play at the top. So as soon as you hit play, you hear like a 15-second snippet of the interview, just to pull you in. Because to your point, Louise, sometimes people say the intros, whether it's the music or just the banter, go on too long.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be sharing some resources with everybody after this, and I'm sure Annie will let us know how she wants you to disseminate those resources. But what makes a bad podcast? What makes you hear it? What makes you cringe and go, oh? As a PR person, there are so many things that I see people do, whether they're other PR people do, or whether they're just people who take PR into their own hands and come to their own hands. And I cringe at them doing that just because I'm a PR and comms person. So in your world as an executive producer of podcasts, what makes you cringe?
So I would say sound matters and words matter. So 3 things make me cringe. The top of it is the editing. So the sound, and just we listen to our shows several times before it goes up. We listen to it as it's been recorded as an interview. So transparency, I have some amazing producers. We're a lean team, but I have 2 amazing producers that work to just quality control the content. Our hosts are hella involved. They're pitching, they have the concepts, they're journalists by nature. So everyone that's on this team is passionate about the story and the words and the quality. And what makes me cringe is when you pull me in with a headline or you pull me in with a description, and then I listen and I get 10 minutes in and it's a letdown. Yeah. Because the sound quality, the editing, I can't hold on. I can't stay around because I'm losing. You're losing me because you didn't take the time to make sure the quality was strong.
Right. Okay. That's great.
So, and then I would also say just making sure that your title and your show notes are there, because and we'll talk more about that stuff tomorrow. But
I'm so glad we've got part 2 tomorrow, because I feel like we could actually have 3 parts. But we definitely needed 2 parts. But if you look in the chat, I know we have 2 minutes left. If you look in the chat, Tiffany, there's a question for you from Violet. Can you see what she's asking? Oh, sorry, yes. Violette or Violet. I'm sorry, Violet. I hope I'm Violette.
Oh, I see it, and I just typed it in. So hi, Violet or Violette. Beautiful.
Beautiful, Douglas. Yeah.
It's called Start Here. I see Spoon and Theory Handmade also just responded. It's called Start Here. It's produced by ABC. Literally 22 minutes, and they get straight to the point, and it's like the top topics of the day. Going back to the earlier question about segments, they create segments. So I know the structure of the 22 minutes each and every episode. So yeah.
And is that US news or global news, international news?
It's U.S. news, but I can definitely see what the international news counterpart is. I don't want to make assumptions, but it's U.S. news. And for the record, if there is not an international news counterpart, that's an opportunity.
That's an opportunity, yeah. I know that some of the podcasts that I listen to, I do listen to the Africa Report, which has great African news, but it's interesting. What I tend to do is I tend to go to specific news outlets. I don't know of many outlets that have a really good, generous cross section of news in equal parts. It tends to be like, oh, we're American news with a sprinkling of international news, but the international news is as it pertains to the US, as opposed to it being a standalone segment. Yeah. Our time is up, Tiffany. Didn't that go quickly?
That went so fast, but it was good. It was great conversing with you. It was amazing. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope y'all enjoyed it.
Yeah, so. No, it definitely was brilliant, and I'm glad that we have a part 2. So before you go, Tiffany, and before, so sorry, have we gone?
No. Go ahead. No.
Okay, so Tiffany is launching the Pod Lab. So do you want to give us a quick sort of wrap up about the Pod Lab? It's what it is and I mean, I know what it is, but can you describe to us what is the podcast? Yeah.
Sure thing. So later this summer, we're launching just consultant. It's basically an agency. So where we assist, consult, and train and help people create and produce their podcasts. And so it's coming soon, later this summer, August. It's literally, we're working on it. And to kick it off, actually, your segue was perfect, Claudine. To kick it off, we're doing office hour sessions. The office hour sessions are complimentary. So I can drop it in the chat or send it over to Ani what the link is. And if you all want to sign up for just 30-minute sessions, you have an idea, you have a concept, you have a podcast, but you have questions, we're kicking off the Pod Lab with the office hour sessions. So.
Brilliant. That's excellent. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was very, very informative. You could tell by the comments that everyone, really loved it. And they're like, wow, I never thought about this. Or what about this? Or why do people do this? So thank you so much. And I look forward to part 2 because you guys are definitely engaging. So I look forward to part 2. Try to enjoy the rest of your Brooklyn day, even though it's hot and humid, just let you know.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Annie.